Good morning and welcome to the Sports Carnival live from the Trauma Center studios. You know, I organized a threesome last night. There were a couple no-shows, but I still had fun. Here's your host, Dave Carney.
Yeah, baby. That was the Menage a Chad, right?
Yeah.
You kind of looked around. You're like, well, there's me and there's you two right there. Hey,
the threesome turns into a one-some.
Gotta love yourself, man. If you don't love yourself, how can you expect anybody else to? That's what I always say.
You can't. It's just that's not the way it works.
Woo, baby. We got a loaded show coming up this morning on the Sports Carnival, broadcasting live from the Trauma Center studios, coast to coast, one in Washington and one out here in Wisconsin. Thanks to our friends at the Recovery Room, Kyle Cable, One Trust Real Estate, Preferred Insurance, the Midwest Mortgage Team, Joe's Helping Hands Landscaping, and Chad, new to the program as a supporter, Sean O'Neill, the O'Neill Law Firm in downtown La Crosse. Fellas and the ladies associated with the fellas, thank you so much for making this show go. We're going to have our sports betting insider, Jon Denton, former UNLV quarterback, Chad, coming up this morning at 8:30. John's got a couple of plays for us, both in the NFL and college football. We're also going to get Johnny's take on the state of the Green Bay Packers. This is going to be something we are going to triage for the rest of the season. We've got a great poll question for you guys and gals on our Twitter feed at the Sports Carney. If you are now amongst the growing group members on our Facebook group page at the Sports Carney as well, take this morning's poll question. Chad, Major League Baseball, NBA basketball with the Bucks just rolling. NFL football, of course, Thursday night football is tonight. We're just packed and loaded. But last night in Major League Baseball, we can't let this go. We saw one of the few combined no-hitters in World Series history. The Astros shut out the Phillies. This coming on the heels of a night in which the Phillies tied a World Series record with 5 dingers in a single game. Let me ask you, man, you watch the juxtaposition of those two games. You go from offensive explosion where Philly shuts out Houston to defensive dominance where Houston shuts out Philly. How do you think that Game 5 works out based upon those two outcomes?
It'll be interesting because it's Justin Verlander against our old buddy, Noah Syndergaard, who used to play for the Las Vegas 51s. Not that we knew him, but he looks a little bit like
like Thor.
But kind of like Thor that rides the short bus, kind of a little bit. He kind of has
Thor that rides the short bus. That's great. Wasn't that Thor's brother?
Yes, it was. And of course, Verlander kind of got beat up in Game 1. So, there's a possibility the Phillies end up winning this game. That's kind of what I'm thinking. I think Noah Syndergaard will throw a good game, and I think that Verlander's not untouchable in the playoffs as he is in the regular season. So we'll see. But yeah, last night's game was pretty interesting. I watched the first 6 innings, and then that was all I needed to watch because all the action happened in the 5th. But Christian Javier he has some heat, some gas that looks like one thing, but it's another. He's throwing 94, but it looks 100. Nobody could catch up with it. It was interesting to watch, I guess. I'm still pulling for the Phillies, so I was a little disappointed. But, as long as it turns into a good series, maybe it goes 7. Who knows?
Well, this is kind of what you had predicted before the series started, that it would be 7 games, Houston, Philadelphia, going back and forth. If I'm remembering correct, Justin Verlander is 0-6 in starts in the World Series. I love that Jason Breacher's reaching out, going back to the Menage a Chad. And he's like, if you eat at the Recovery Room, the food alone will make you touch yourself. 2 birds? Yeah. Few birds. He's not wrong about that. The food at the Recovery Room is fucking delicious. It really is. Chad, that's why, and I've said this to many people, and they've been in the know once they've stopped in there. It's like you had a 4-star restaurant sandwiched in a little neighborhood bar and grill, and you walk in and you're just like, wait, what happened here? Mm-hmm. This is what I'm going to be served for food. Okay, great. Let's keep it coming. I love that. This series, though, has been awesome. And I know we said perhaps 7 games. Look, we talked to Bob Ibeck, not on the program, but, personally last week, because Bob had some other things come up on Friday, and we're going to try to get Bob on the show tomorrow, and I believe we'll be able to do that. But in asking Bob, Chad, his thoughts about the World Series, and we told you all this on Monday, if the Phillies won Game 1, it was Bob's estimation that they would have a better than a puncher's chance to win the series. You could start to see from the line movement last night, Chad, even though the Phillies were dogs, you would have to pay heavy vig to take them as dogs. You could sort of see that the Vegas folks, the sharps, are starting to pick up to exactly what the Phillies are putting down. But now we're here in a tie series. I don't know what the record is as far as percentages in Major League Baseball when a series is 2-1 and you win Game 4. It's not like winning a Game 5 in a pivotal 7-game series, because that sort of turns into 67 to 70% of the winners of Game 5 win the series. So tonight's game will be hugely important. And we'll see where the loyalty of Philadelphia is this evening. Are they going to be watching their Eagles team take on the Houston Texans, or are they going to be watching their Phillies take on these Houston Astros? I think it's going to be a Phillies night.
You think so? I mean, I think the Eagles are favored by like 14 points or something like that.
That's crazy.
In fact, I wouldn't mind asking Denton, because I know that Houston sucks, and I understand the Eagles are undefeated. But when you see that many points in the NFL, that sparks my interest. I don't know about you, Dave. I mean,
it sparks my interest a lot.
It's not college football. You know what I mean? It's just normally, I'm not saying that the Eagles can't win by 2 or 3 or 4 touchdowns. Who knows? But that one kind of sparks my interest a smidge.
Yeah, it definitely is a large line, and you're right. We'll talk to John about that. JD was asking me what else it is that we needed to cover so he could be prepared, and I said, hey, we've got to talk some Packers, but we're going to need some general NFL stuff from you. So I'd ask him about that. A part of me does want to put some money down, maybe even a sprinkling of dollars down on Houston plus those points, because if this gets bet up even further through the day, which I doubt that it will, it'll probably start to trend down a little bit. But if it gets bet up further, and if we go over 14 points, and who knows, maybe I'll put a teaser together here and sprinkle some extra points on these things so that I can get a more favorable outcome. But it definitely is something to watch out for.
The other thing, I don't want to sound like an asshole, and I know who we're speaking to here, but Lions plus the points interests me too. I'll be honest.
I know.
I don't want to pile on. I don't want to pile on, but it feels like an opportune time. Lions at home, they're getting points. They're playing Green Bay. That's just it. I mean, in disarray, it seems like. I don't know. It seems like an opportune time. Does it not?
See, Jimmy the Haggerty is checking in right here. Jim Tim 86, and we see he's talking about the Bucks. We'll be getting to that, Jim. Hold tight. The thing is this: there are a lot of home teams this weekend that are getting points, and that is called candy. When you have home teams getting points, especially at this point of the season, that's like called candy. So I'm interested in that line too. I've been neglecting it because
you smile.
I didn't want to go too far too fast on this, but I tell you what we'll do, because these guys.
Come on, you're thinking the exact same thing I'm thinking.
All right, guys. When we come back, we're going to roll out of the gates just like the Milwaukee Bucks, who are off to a historic tying 7-0 start. The Bucks just cruised past Detroit last night. Stick around. You're watching and listening to the Sports Carnival broadcasting live from the Trauma Center studios. What can I say? The Recovery Room on 7th and Mississippi Street is not only my favorite bar in all of downtown La Crosse, Wisconsin, it's my favorite restaurant in all of downtown La Crosse, Wisconsin. Breakfast served 8 to noon, Saturday and Sundays, daily specials, incredible cocktails, and the best damn wait staff in the entire city. My buddy Matt knows how to treat you right, and that's why when you go to the Recovery Room on 7th and Mississippi, you're always going to have a great time and a great meal with a great cocktail. So if you haven't been in a while, or perhaps you're just regular and you want to stop in again, make it a thing. I'm there every single week. How about you?
Coming to Fox this fall, it's the Bench Brothers.
Talking about that street clothes in Westbrook.
They're getting down on the bench. The Bench Brothers, brought to you by Big Dick's Hoagie Heaven. Remember, ladies, the first 6 inches is free. And by Don Francisco's. At Don Francisco's, if you're up all night, so are we.
Street clothes in Westbrook.
They're getting down on the bench.
Yes, back to the action live from the Trauma Center studios. This is the one and only Sports Carnival, where I had a joke about amnesia, but I forgot it. Now here's your host, Dave Carney.
Well, Chad, I guess I forgot that last night the Lakers were going to be extra motivated to beat the New Orleans Pelicans. I took New Orleans minus 2.5 points. It was my daily play. And I felt really good about that. As a matter of fact, the Pelicans were going to win that game. There was like 0.5 of a second left. They're winning by 3 points, which let me not, have to go too far as a math major to tell you that would have covered the spread. And then this guy named Matt Ryan, the one that was recently benched by the Indianapolis Colts, apparently
he was there.
NBA basketball, hit that shot and sent the Lakers into overtime. There's a guy on the Lakers named Matt Ryan. And Matt Ryan hit this shot that sent him into overtime. Basically played 1 or 2 games with the Celtics last year, got a roster invite because the Lakers were looking for people that made $50 to $100 a day that could shoot 3-pointers. And Matt Ryan was there, apparently. And this fucking guy sent the Lakers into overtime, and they beat the Pelicans last night. So sort of upset my apple cart, but I'm still on this fade the Lakers train until they show us otherwise. That piece that you put together, though, the Bench Brothers, that's hilarious. And by the way, Anthony Street Clothes Davis, give it about a day or two or a game or two, he'll be out. Like, his back was so bad last night. He was standing under one side of the basket almost the whole entire night. He looked like fucking Wilt Chamberlain. It was awful.
That's sad. I kind of feel bad for the guy, but he is a little fragile. He's like Mr. Glass. It's like no matter what happens during the season, he figures out a way to get injured. And you kind of feel bad for him a little bit, but such is life. And then
is life.
Actually, what's interesting since I've made that, Westbrook has actually played pretty well.
Yeah.
He's coming better off the bench than he is starting. So 6th man of the year, who knows?
You know what? Listen, Russell Westbrook is a good not good. He's a great basketball player. This guy's the only player in the NBA, the history of the league, to average a triple-double for multiple seasons. He took an Oklahoma City team that had literally nobody on it to the postseason because he was just so good, and did the same thing essentially with Washington and Bradley Beal a couple of years ago. But at this point in his career, what he surely isn't is a complementary piece to a guy like LeBron and Anthony Davis, which means you've got to bring this guy off the bench, because if he's with the second unit, he's obviously the best player on that second unit, which means he gets to be the focal point of that. That always made the most sense to me when they acquired Russell Westbrook. I still can't figure out what it is the Lakers were doing, but you know what? That's okay, because while the Lakers go into disarray and they don't look anything close to a championship contending team, the Milwaukee Bucks, as Jimmy the Haggerty brought up this morning, the Milwaukee Bucks are on pace, Chad, to blow the doors off of this NBA season. They remain the only undefeated team in the National Basketball Association. Last night went to 7-0 after defeating the Pistons 116-91. Now, interestingly, this was the worst shooting performance of the season for both Giannis Antetokounmpo and the Bucks, Chad. You see this?
He still had 32 points.
He still had 32 points and 12 rebounds, and he shot
what a horrible night.
Slightly below 50%. But look at the Bucks on three-point shots last night. They shot only 26.3% on three-pointers, but outscored the Pistons in the paint 56-30. Out-rebounded them 52-35. This is what this Milwaukee Bucks team is going to do all season long. If they can't hit their threes, they will just go downhill on you with the most dangerous weapon, the literal most dangerous weapon in the National Basketball Association, Giannis. And when he decides to kick it out, the Bucks, unlike the Lakers, have professional shooters, Chad, that can make baskets on a regular basis, not on a fluky once-in-a-while type of a basis. This Bucks team, as currently constructed and playing the way they are, without even Middleton, Ingles, and Pat Connaughton, are scary good. I love every single second of Bucks basketball because of this guy that we see on our screen right now, Giannis. He is just so awesome. He's awesome.
He really is. And I know Brook Lopez didn't have a great night last night, but Brook Lopez, and we mention this every time, but I have to because I think it's worth it. Brook Lopez is playing out of his mind this year, and Bobby Portis Jr., man, I'll tell you what, Westbrook off of the bench is good. Bobby Portis Jr. is better. That's right. I am putting it on the record, at least off the bench.
I think that Bobby Portis, if he plays the way that he's been playing so far, Chad, and no, this guy averages 16 points and 10 rebounds, that's the 6th man of the year, especially for a team that's going to be winning at the rate in which they're winning. Now, the record now, 7-0 for the Bucks, it matches the franchise's best record to start a season. And we've talked about this a couple of days ago. When you started to look at 5-0, go to 6-0, I said, well, there are a couple of examples, Chad, in which that Bucks team that won those games went on to great things. 71-72, that was an NBA championship team. The 2018-19 Bucks were almost, Chad, an NBA championship team before they got ousted by Toronto in that conference final series. But when you look at what this Bucks team is doing as compared to the 18-19 team, because 71-72 is, you've got Kareem, you've got Bobby Dandridge, you've got, Oscar Robertson. That's a few Hall of Famers on that team. This one might have it in the future. But when I'm looking at this team compared to 18-19, it almost feels like it's a completely different squad. Even though some of the players are still the same, the maturation of Giannis, the maturation of Chris Middleton, the ascension, which in a late career stage for a big guy in Brook Lopez, who you keep talking about, which is completely like unheard of, just continues to roll. And this team, I mean, I don't want to get too hyperbolic because it's still early and lots of things can happen. This team feels like already the clear-cut best NBA team, and by a wide margin.
And I don't think you're exaggerating. I think that's true right now. Obviously, it's early in the season. So for all of you pessimists out there, don't think of 3-5. Think of 7-0.
Right.
If you're in Wisconsin, don't think of 3-5. Think of 7-0. That's really what you have to transition into, especially when it goes to 3-6 or 3-7 or 3-8.
This thing could end up 3-14 if they're not careful.
It could be.
The Packers have been playing, this thing could end up 3-14. But you're right. Focus on that. We've got our poll question about the Packers on our Twitter feed, our Facebook group page about what's more disappointing, their record or not making a trade. But something else that I wanted to touch on, because we're going to talk about, Chad, what Aaron Charles Rodgers had to say to reporters yesterday, Rob Domofsky from ESPN. We've got some stuff to show you, but I want to juxtapose. I want to throw that in juxtaposition to what Giannis had to say, which if you're watching us, you can see here, because this is all about a team mentality. So the quote is, "I'm happy that the team is winning, but that's like second. I'm happy that the team is building good habits. I'm happy that we can be good even if we don't make shots. That doesn't affect us. We still play hard. We still move the ball." And here's the most important takeaway for me in this particular quote, Chad. Guys are not talking by themselves. We talk to one another. We are in a very good place. That feels so different than what the Green Bay Packers are currently experiencing. It is refreshing. And Chad, this is something that we've talked about both on this show and together off this show about leadership and the way that not just guys, but people will follow leaders. There's a certain element of selflessness, even if it's faux selflessness, that you have to show in order to get buy-in from people. On a large scale, I don't know that Aaron does that. On a large scale, I can see with my own two eyes, Giannis Antetokounmpo is doing that right now.
Yeah, he actually, there was an interview, and we mentioned this a couple of days back. There was an interview during the game that talked to him, and he actually referred to himself as a role player. That's actually what he thinks he is a role player. When he's a superstar, he's probably the best player in the league, but that's not how he sees himself. And clearly he conducts himself that way. He plays that way. And it's evident on the floor and off the floor. And it is kind of refreshing to see somebody as dominant as him, to be as humble as him, and to be so team-oriented as him. Wondering if Giannis can play tight end. Because if he could, the Packers could use him. Could you imagine a 7-foot Giannis playing tight end?
Good God.
That would be pretty awesome.
There would be no pass out of his catch radius, right? Like there would be no pass out of his catch radius whatsoever.
Morning Wood says the only competition for the Bucks in the East is Toronto and Miami. And
no,
I think that's probably, Boston's not completely out of it.
Boston will be the toughest competitor for them because Boston's got the right team. Toronto is too young. Scotty Barnes, I like it. Morning Wood, I do. Scotty Barnes is too young. Pascal Siakam's too injury prone. I don't know that he's consistent enough. I like Fred VanVleet for sure. The Toronto Raptors are well coached. They really are. They're well coached. They've got a great organization. I like them. I saw Matty Ice put up a message about the tough game coming up against the T-Wolves. That will be a tough one. That is tomorrow night. It says Wednesday. It's not. I'm sorry. I forgot to change that. That's tomorrow night, 9:00 on ESPN. So I apologize if you're watching this. It's not correct. It should be for tomorrow night. That'll be tough. But in the Eastern Conference, I guess I would say Miami will be a tough out. They're just always going to be a tough out. Spoelstra's a great coach. Jimmy Butler, Tyler Hero, a Wisconsin native, Tyler Hero, is really balling out for that Heat team. But ultimately, I think the Celtics are probably the team that the Bucks will knock off or have to knock off in the Eastern Conference Finals, barring something, wild happening. If Kevin Durant and this whole Nets debacle goes tits up and they end up trading him and Kyrie just to blow this thing up, that could reshuffle the landscape. And there were talks that Kevin Durant would be bound for Miami over the offseason when he was initially requesting his trade. That would obviously change things. But right now, I think it's the Celtics. I really do. They feel like the most complete team next to Milwaukee at this time because Jason Tatum, I don't know exactly where he ranks in the NBA right now, but I think he's probably top 5 as far as current players that are on the court right now. He's a top 5 guy.
I would say, him, Giannis, Luka, Ja Morant. I would say he's probably up there.
Listen, Matty Ice is also bringing up another great point. By the way, if you want to reach out to us, do so on YouTube or on Twitch. That's where we get to see your names pop up the most. Matty Ice says, don't underestimate Cleveland. What an exciting basketball game that was last night, by the way, fellas. If you didn't watch, Cleveland beat the Celtics in OT by a single point.
Thanks.
Darius Garland had a great game. Donovan Mitchell is looking really good in that Cleveland outfit. And Evan Mobley, the kid from USC, Chad, the Cavs are no joke either. I don't think they're ready yet. Like, I don't think they're ready for the smoke that the Milwaukee Bucks are going to bring. But in the regular season, yeah, for sure.
It was disappointing because Tatum put that into overtime, and then they end up losing in overtime. And I fell asleep, so I didn't get to see that. I just remember going to bed, and I was like, oh, cool, Tatum, all right, yay. And then I was and I'm done. It's over with.
That's wicked hardcore.
Yeah, hardcore.
P12 Foreman says 7-foot Michael Southall played tight end for West Salem back in high school. Yeah, but Michael wasn't in high school at the time. He was 34. That's not fair.
Morning Wood says, how exciting is Ja Morant? Must-see TV. I have to agree 100%. Yeah. This kid is electric. He brings a little bit of street ball. He reminds you a little bit of Derrick Rose, kind of reminds you a little bit of who's that other guy?
Allen Iverson to me.
Allen Iverson a little bit.
Iverson, yeah.
And then he's got his own thing. I mean, some of the wraparound passes and wraparound dribbles that he does are amazing. And then, of course, when he goes vertical, and now you add on, he's been working on his three-pointer. I think if he could crack 37 to 38% at some point in his career, he's going to be MVP hands down.
He'll be a 40% shooter by the time it's all said and done, because he never had like a broken shot, right? It wasn't Lonzo Ball's broken shot. It's just that when you have that kind of athleticism, why spend too much time hovering around the perimeter when you can take it to the rack and just do what he does?
Yeah.
But Morning Wood, I agree with you. And if it weren't for Giannis Antetokounmpo, I think we talked about this the other day, Chad. If it weren't for Giannis, Ja Morant would be my favorite player in the NBA right now. And that Memphis Grizzlies team, fucking forget about the East. The West is way loaded. I mean, way loaded. Here's P12 Foreman back with us, says, by the way, I got me a Bobby Dandridge autographed and inscribed Hall of Fame 2021 Bucks jersey that could very well be a Sports Carnival giveaway.
Wow.
By Foreman's Funhouse. That would be fantastic, man. That would be fantastic.
Is you know what? I have a pretty good memory, and I have a pretty good history of the NBA. I don't remember Bobby Dandridge.
Wow, good player.
How do I not know? I don't remember Bobby Dandridge. Why do I not remember that name?
He played over a decade in the NBA. I think 12, 13 years. He is in the Hall of Fame. He was one of the main cogs for that Bucks team when they won the championship back in 71-72 with Oscar.
Oh, that's why, because it was 71-72.
Yeah, it was a little before our time.
Okay.
I'm not going to say that it was like right when we were kids and starting to watch the NBA. So Chad and I grew up in the Magic, Larry Bird NBA.
Sidney Moncrief is a name that I remember from the Bucks. Okay, Terry Cummings,
Maurice Lucas. You remember
Maurice
those
Lucas, yes. Those are some of the names. Ricky Pierce, before he played for the Sonics, played for the Bucks. Those were great teams, by the way. I remember in the 80s being a Celtic fan. A lot of people don't, that's why I always kind of give crap to the Laker fans, because the Lakers didn't really play anybody in the West. They didn't really have any competition until they made it to the East. The East, you had to go through the Bucks, you had to go through the Hawks, you had to go through the 76ers.
The Bulls,
it was tough. The Bulls,
Pistons.
Yeah.
The Knicks.
The Lakers played nobody.
No, it was diametrically different in the Lakers era of the 1980s. The Houston Rockets were always a good team. Denver under Doug Moe played some good basketball in the 80s. But you're right. It was the beasts of the East and the less of the West. I do see Neil Duda checking in here. He's like, go Suns. I think you guys forgot to mention their beatdown of the Timberwolves 2 nights ago. Well, it's not that we forgot. It's just that we only have so much time. But Neil, that you bring it up, Phoenix is looking good. And Chris Paul, who started off this season like looking really out of sorts, old, if you will, he's really picked it up and is looking a lot better. As a matter of fact, Chad, while we're thinking about it, I'm going to ask you to get that Bucks ticket giveaway slide ready for us. Yesterday, we announced here on the program, and this is thanks to our friends at the Recovery Room, Absolute Vodka, and Jameson Irish Whiskey, that we've got an opportunity for you to go to a Bucks game versus who Matty Ice says could be possibly the second best team in the Eastern Conference, the Toronto Raptors, on the 7th of December. So all you're going to have to do is go to the Recovery Room starting today, order a shot of Absolute or Jameson or a cocktail with either of those particular liquors in them, and you're going to get an entry slip. Now, at the end of the month, Chad, and this is something that my mom was curious if we'd be able to fly you in for, and I told her probably not this time, unfortunately. But at the end of the month, on the 30th of November, we're going to have a huge party from 6 to 10 in the evening, and you're going to get a chance for double entries. We'll announce the winner live, Chad, on the program the 1st of December. Again, the game comes up December 7th at the Fiserv Forum. Had a couple of friends last night actually down in Milwaukee for that game. A friend of mine, Brian, that lives here in town, Gabby, who works at the Recovery Room, actually got to borrow one of Uncle Dave's sweatshirts so that she could go down there and look appropriately geared up. And the Bucks really did. They showed out. It wasn't a great shooting performance. Again, under 50% for Giannis, but a 116-91 victory, 7-0. And you get to see this team on the 7th of December. Just get down to the recovery room, open at 11 o'clock today. Order a shot of Jameson or Absolute Vodka or a cocktail of both and get your first entry slip.
What a chore. You have to drink a shot to be able to win these awesome tickets. You could do both. You could do an Irish Russian, right? Just mix them together and just go blackout drunk. Drink responsibly, by the way. I'm not suggesting that.
Well, what you mean to say is drink Wisconsinably, which is actually a shirt that we have out here. It's everywhere. It says drink Wisconsinably, which means just keep it coming high and deep. Just keep it coming. Speaking of,
we're not tasking anybody too much with asking them to have to. Okay, good. Okay.
This is where I found out the state of Wisconsin, specifically the home of the Green Bay Packers. And we've got a lot still to digest with this Packers team. Aaron Rodgers spoke to media yesterday. But I found out that when I was in Green Bay, one of the times that I was in Green Bay, I got a little history lesson from somebody that was, I don't know, a Green Bay native for a long time and had families, history there, generations. Apparently, back in the Prohibition ages, the late 20s, early 30s, Green Bay was absolutely not a dry place, and every federal agent knew it. The problem apparently they had with Green Bay was twofold. One, Al Capone and his cohorts lived just on the other side of the lake in Chicago, and we're sending over these little boats all the time to fuck these guys up in the alphabet, soup brigade. But then also, there was just, because Wisconsin is kind of sparse, it's dark at night, they couldn't figure out how to get all the booze. We're here with Canada and just go down the little, get some Canadian whiskey coming over a little piece of the Upper Peninsula, I suppose, and then we're in Wisconsin. And Green Bay became an absolute known city that just had liquor, even in the midst of Prohibition. Federally illicit, Green Bay, what are you going to do? These people aren't going to stop drinking. That's just not happening.
So it's permeated the state.
Yes. It's fantastic. Remember when we would go out in the morning in Las Vegas and people have thought that this was not a thing, but it's true. Chad and I would go out in the morning. Sometimes it's 11:30. We'd be done with the show, gotten all wrapped up. And we go into a bar and I'm going to probably drink and Chad's probably not, but people look at you kind of crazy like, dude, it's early. What are you doing? I'm like, dude, Lefty's over there with 3 teeth pounding away on the video poker. And you're looking at me like I've got a problem. It's here in Wisconsin, though, you hit a pub at 11 o'clock. They're like, good. What took you so long? Good to see you. What happened?
In Vegas, though, is it early or is it late? Right. Sometimes day could turn into night and night could turn into day and you haven't left the bar. I have, back in the day when I did pound them a lot more than I do now, I remember walking out of the bar going, God, the sunlight, because I've been there too long. And shout out to everybody. Breakfast. That's why they serve breakfast 24 hours there.
That's right. Well, that's for sure, man. That's one thing that you do get used to is being able to get whatever you want, whenever you want. Yeah. But the PT pubs that we would kick it in and some of these timbers, I mean, they're gorgeous, but dark. And they do this on purpose. When you go to Vegas, if you've never been, they put you in these spaces where, they've got lots of fluorescent lights and all this shit, but you can't see outside. So you never really know what time of day it is. And it's always temperature controlled. So it never changes in that way. And it does something to your mentality. You used to play a little bit of Keno from time to time.
I had some luck with that.
Yeah.
Keno.
You can go into those spaces, right, where you're playing. You're like, oh, it's like 8 hours later. I didn't realize that.
Well, what's bad is when you go to the ATM and the ATM rejects you because you've withdrawn too much money in one sitting. That's when it's bad. Hey, Foreman is checking in. It says, if Chad has the ability to be in Wisconsin at 11:30, I know a guy with a rich wife who would love to pay for his airfare. Well, that's very kind of you, Foreman. Okay. I don't know if I can make that, but I appreciate the gesture. That's very nice.
What we're going to be doing is, a full court press on Chad to basically come out here. And the way that we're going to do this, guys, is to keep supporting the program, to keep piling us in with these comments, right? Perhaps Jon Denton will give us some free plays that we're able to cash in on and make a ton of money with. Then we can afford to bring Chad out here. See, what we have to do is buy his loyalty. Chad's into Washington right now, but if we buy his loyalty, he'll be here. Speaking of making money, when we come back, our sports betting guru, former star quarterback for the University of Nevada, Las Vegas's Rebels football team, Jon Denton, will be joining the program here. Stick around. We're broadcasting live from the Trauma Center studios, powered by the Recovery Room. Now more than ever, if you're looking to buy or sell your first home or perhaps an investment property, you need a full-time dedicated real estate agent who is up to date on all the latest trends and analysis and is ready to give you the kind of service that you deserve. That's why the official real estate agent and the official real estate partner of the Sports Carnival is Kyle Cable of One Trust Real Estate. Whether you're looking to buy or sell your first home or perhaps you are a seasoned investor, call the official real estate agent partner of the Sports Carnival, Kyle Cable of One Trust Real Estate.
Preferred Insurance is the official auto, home, business, flood, and life insurance agency of the Sports Carnival, serving folks in La Crosse and surrounding areas with licenses in Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Iowa. As an independent insurance agency, Preferred Insurance is free to find the very best insurance for you, your family, or your business needs. Call my friends at Preferred Insurance today and set up a free consultation. Remember, working with an independent agency means Preferred Insurance works for you, with you, to find the best solutions at the best prices.
Now back to the action at the Sports Carnival, broadcasting live at the Trauma Center studios. Remember, light travels faster than sound. That's why some people appear brighter until they open their mouths. Now here's your host, Dave Carney.
Well, you know what that old saying was? We talked about it the other day. It's better to be considered a fool and keep your mouth shut than to open it and remove all doubt. Before we bring John on, I've just got to put this text up here from Tony Russo, Preferred Insurance. He says, the coos will fly you in, I think is what he meant to say in that particular text. The coos will fly you in. I love Todd Vercruyze, Mike Garcia, Midwest Mortgage Team, Land Home Financial. I'm actually wearing the throwback Land Home Financial hat this morning because I wanted to wear my baby blues. So that's what we went with. Matty Ice checking in is like, Chad has got to get a look at the world's largest six-pack here in La Crosse. That's another thing. Okay, so we have a brewery here. We have a famous brewery in town, the Heilman Brewery. Now it brews basically, I don't know, every kind of energy drink and one of these seltzers. But it used to be just a beer brewery, right? So outside of this thing is the world's largest six-pack. I'm talking about huge, gargantuan, statuesque cans of beer. It's awesome. When you're here in La Crosse, you just, and I would say in the state of Wisconsin, but in La Crosse specifically, you just get the idea that having cocktails is good and good for you. And with that segue, we're going to bring on Jon Denton, who used to play some football out there in Las Vegas, set, I don't know, every single freshman passing record for dozens of years until they started opening up offenses. And now, of course, he's our sports betting insider. JD, welcome back to the Sports Carnival. How the fuck you doing today?
I think you're on mute there, Johnny.
You're on mute. That's okay. I see that you're on mute.
There it is.
I thought that was handled by the control center there. I apologize.
That's my bad. I'll take responsibility.
That's all right. That's all right. Blame it on cousin Vinny.
That's right. That's right. Cousin Vinny's Soak and Poke. Remember that place out there?
Oh man, that's I want to get out to La Crosse. I don't care about the beers. I just want to come to the Soak and Poke.
Yeah, that's what we wanted because
everybody wants to be there.
Listen, John, when we put this together the other day, if you haven't seen Todd Vercruyze's, the Coozes Soak and Poke that Chad did, my mom and I actually talked to John. You, me, Chad all lived in Vegas, but you and I, John, lived in Vegas way earlier than even Chad did, right? Mm-hmm. There was a place on Sahara Avenue back in the late 70s, early 80s that was a Soak and Poke that actually existed. This was real. How many times you go?
I would say early 90s, too, it was open.
What? I don't know. Is this played against Sam's? Larry's Villa? What are we talking about?
No, this was like the Green Door. Like the Green Door. Yeah.
The Red Rooster, the Green Door.
I think I went once, as like fellas, we're going to the Green Door, see what we can get into. And I went like 5 minutes. I'm like, I'm out. I'm like, I'm out of here. I'm not equipped to be hanging out with these guys.
It's not what you think it is. Yeah.
No, definitely not.
Never lives up to it.
It really isn't. John, I would just say this. At the Green Door, they base things. It's the sumo culture. It's really about the poundage. And in order to get through, you have
how big your belt is.
Exactly. Yeah, I went there a couple of times as a voyeur, and I've never been able to forget what I saw that evening. Let me just put it that way.
Tragic.
No doubt.
JD, before we get into your picks, because we told our audience this morning you've got a couple in college, you've got a couple in the NFL. I want to go back to something that we talked to you about last week because this story, the narrative keeps on expanding as the Packers keep struggling. Green Bay's sitting at 3-5. You did tell our audience correctly not to bet against the Packers on the spread because the number was too big. And Green Bay covers that particular spread. A lot of Packer fans were looking at that second half and trying to feel good about it. The Bills stopped playing defense. That's what really happened. But John, this Green Bay team now sits at 3-5 and made 0 moves during the trade deadline. Every other NFC North team made a trade of significance. The Green Bay Packers were not able to get it done. On Twitter, you mentioned something about perception. And when a player sees something happen, a whole team sees something happen, the perception of action can almost lead to more momentum. Tell us why you think not making a move perhaps was more detrimental than folks are really believing right now for this Green Bay Packer team.
Well, I think as a player, right, when you have high expectations and those expectations aren't being met so far in the first quarter, maybe kind of half of the season, and the people running the show have an opportunity to help out and probably plug a few holes, bridge a few gaps here or there, and they don't do it, right? It's, to me, that perception says, hey, we're counting on you. To me, it didn't, when you have the Bears, you have the Vikings, you have all these other teams surrounding them making moves, the perception is everybody else is trying to get better, and we're just sitting here as lame ducks. That, to me, is how it was. And when you look at, I'll talk about this in one of my picks this in the NFL, I took a team that made a big move on defense, right? Because that's where they were lacking. And when you look at what the quotes came out of the locker room from that trade alone, man, give me that team this week, right? Short favorite, we'll go over it. But I mean, it's that perception, that little switch, especially when teams are expected to be good or they're right on the cusp of turning the corner.
I know it's not one of your picks, and we don't want to piss anybody off that's a Packer fan, but are you seeing value with Lions in the points at home?
No, I would actually, it's Packers are one of the plays that I would look at this week playing, just because how atrocious the defense is for Detroit. It's not so much a play on the Packers, it's a play against Detroit. I like a lot of points being scored. I really do. I think this is probably an offensively get-right game for Green Bay, in my opinion. Maybe even a defensive get-right game for them, too.
Listen, fellas, if this game against Detroit isn't some sort of Band-Aid, a get-right game, whatever this is for Green Bay, there's serious issues. Because, JD, when you start to look at the remainder of that schedule, if they don't beat Detroit, which would, first of all, just anger and sully Packer fans on a more visceral level, but if they don't beat Detroit, you could be looking realistically at the rest of the season with maybe 2 wins. Maybe. And that's, again, being generous. If they can't close the door on a Detroit team that you mentioned plays little to no defense, just traded their best tight end and a weapon for Jared Goff over the middle of the field, if they can't beat that team, they're fucked. I mean, this team is fucked. And there's no other way to say it. That's just as plain as it can be.
And as a sports bettor, if they can't cover a short 3, right? Or I think it's 3.5.
3.5 right now.
I mean, that to me is like, I mean, you're definitely, when you go back to the power ratings or like the preseason, they had all these lines out at the preseason for the whole year, right? These guys were probably 10-point favorites, right? Yeah. So now you're telling me they're 3.5. You know, I'll take that value.
All right, John, let's look at the plays that you did give us for this weekend. If you're new to the program, perhaps this is the first time you've watched or you've listened to the Sports Carnival. John was incredible in the NFL and college football last year. Started off this season on an absolute tear in college football as well. And that's where we want to start with your college football play. So you gave us 3, Texas minus 2.5 points, Clemson minus 4, and then Western Kentucky minus 16. Clemson and Texas, 2 big teams. Western Kentucky, you'll have to fill us in on what it is that you see here. But let's start with Texas. Why are you making that play?
Yeah, I think, let's just step back a second. I think I was publicly called out on Twitter by one of our followers and one of our avid listeners here. I won't mention her name on the show, but hey, she did mention that I was 1-3 the last couple of weeks, but you know, I love it. I love it. It just, it gives the juices going to get these games and find some winners, right? I think they forget when you hit 7 out of 10 on a weekly basis, sure. Right? They only remember the 3 that you lose, right? It's okay.
Of course.
We love you, Shar. We love you. Texas minus 2.5 at Kansas State. Listen, guys, this is a public perception game for me. A couple guys that I follow called this a trap game. Very easily, Texas could be undefeated when you look at the season. I've been on Texas a few times this year. Even on this show, I've lost with them, but I've won a few times. They're coming off a bye week with 2 weeks to prepare. I follow a guy named Brad Powers over at VSiN. Has them in the top 10 power rating team as one of his power rated teams. So there is still some love for the Sharps from Texas. I'll give you a quick synopsis of like perception. When I mean perception, the last outing versus Oklahoma State, Texas lost. They came back, gave it up in the second half. They had 14 penalties that game for 120 yards. Oklahoma State had 0 penalties. So they had the favoritism of the refs on the side. They dominated the game, 6.5 yards per rush versus Oklahoma State. I think they held them to like 3.4. They got the number 12 run adjusted defense. They're going up against Deuce Vaughn. They have a one-dimension offense at K-State. All the quarterbacks are banged up. But the market expectations and why I'm taking Texas is that they both just played Oklahoma State. Texas was a 6.5-point road favorite. K-State was a 2.5 home favorite. Clearly telling you that the market is eyeing Texas as the superior team here. I'm going with Texas minus 2.5.
It makes a lot of sense, Chad. You know, oftentimes we see these numbers as the non-sharps, and they kind of confuse us. It can keep us away from these games, right? Mm-hmm. Especially when you see a 2.5-point spread. But when you break it down, that sounds really good. And perhaps what we'll talk about a little bit off air, we'll get back into this conversation on Twitter, is how people could put some of these games together with a parlay or even a teaser spread. So let's go Clemson -4. Clemson's on the outside looking in of the college football playoff picture right now, I believe, right? So the top 4 came out the other day. What do you think about this team going forward? They're going to have to win out, and they're going to have to be impressive. So -4 feels like sort of a soft landing spot for them right here.
Yeah, again, these two plays that I just were talking about are pure matchup plays for me. As you know, I'm a big data guy, research trends, but I'm also here kind of getting back into more of these matchup plays. And this is really where a play against Notre Dame. They blasted a lame duck Syracuse team. Syracuse just lost to Clemson, if you remember, with that historical. I think there was like 17 or 24-point comeback from the quarterback was replaced, all this good stuff, right? So Notre Dame's seen a slight resurgence lately, but who they played? UNLV, Syracuse. Now they step up a little bit in competition. Notre Dame has averaged 45. I think it's either 45 or 46 run attempts per game. They only attempted 5 passes versus Syracuse in the second half. Clemson has 2 weeks to prepare, off a bye. Number 1 defensive line in the country in all ratings, all Mel Kipers, anything from draft rating. They have the studs. So they're going to force Notre Dame to throw, become one-dimensional. And the one that really sealed the deal for me is Notre Dame's red zone defense is dead last out of 183 Division I football teams, allowing 80% success rate. I don't care who's at quarterback for Clemson. They're going to score. Give me the Clemson Tigers -4.
Good God, that's awful news. That basically means that anybody's going to walk in there. Do you think that Chip Kelly's departure, because he hasn't exactly been lighting it up for LSU, and I know they've got a big game coming up this weekend against Alabama, but do you think Chip Kelly's departure has had that dramatic of a difference, or is it really the fact that Notre Dame, because they play out of a conference, they're an independent team, they have really high educational standards, just can't get the horses that these other teams can?
I'll tell you what, man, they are inept at the quarterback position. That is one area that is extreme. I mean, they run the ball very well. They got a good offensive line, and they got a great defense. They got one of the better defenses in the country. But when you get into these games where you're playing like a BYU or even a Stanford that has just an equal offensive line or an equal run game, right? They become one-dimensional, and the quarterbacks cannot win it for Notre Dame. So I think that's the play against Notre Dame for me here. And then obviously they can't hold anybody out of the red zone, which is crucial. Yeah.
And I said Chip Kelly. I meant Brian Kelly. Brian Kelly all of a sudden is a Southerner. You've also got Western Kentucky minus. I love that. As soon as I went down to Louisiana, boys, I became a good family man. I don't know where I was up in West Lafayette. Anyways, and then you've got Western Kentucky -16. I want to transition, though, to the NFL, JD, because there are a couple of games here. You've put the Ravens -2.5 and the Bills -12.5 that I desperately want to get into. And I want to start with the Bills. Okay. This is a team right now that is coming off of a game in which they didn't cover against Green Bay. The number is even bigger here. Why are you so sold that the Bills are going to be able to cover this large of a number? Again, Chad and I were talking about the Philly spread tonight being 13.5, 14.5. It just feels like a lot for an NFL team. So why are you so specifically focusing in on this one?
Well, I think specifically talking about that game tonight and all the points, I mean, you're talking about a Thursday night game, a short week, a lot of different variables, right? Most of the time you would take the points in those situations, right? I wouldn't even look to lay 2 touchdowns. It's either points or nothing for me. I wouldn't even touch the over under just because you don't know how these teams are going to react off a Thursday night kind of, short week. who's banged up, like who's healthy, all that stuff. There's just too many variables for me. So when I'm looking at the Bills, it's really, they play in the Jets. Bills have been double-digit favorites in this spot the last 2 years. They've handled business. They've actually been 16.5-point favorites. I think it was last year, went in and handled business. AFC race, AFC East, with Miami, can't afford to slip up. I think from last week, again, kind of that ho-hum. You saw how they rested a little bit of the folks against Green Bay in that kind of third and a half to fourth quarter. Zach Wilson is doo-doo, man. He is just terrible from a downfield perspective. Wow. All due respect to him. I love the quarterbacks, but he is very inept throwing the ball down the field at the past 15 yards. I just think Buffalo's defense is going to smother these guys. And I do think that you're going to start to see some regression back towards the mean here with both of these New York teams. One of these ESPN had them rated like 6th in the power ratings or something like that. I'm like, geez, come on. It's like now is the time to start fading these teams. And if you can get the Bills under 13, which I did last night, I'm taking that all day. And then even with the Ravens that we can talk about, I'm going to look to tease those two for a 6-point teaser as well, play those outright, and then obviously tease them together.
Zach Wilson can bang moms, though. He's a MILF hunter, right? He's got that going for him. He can't win football games, but he can nail your mom. So there's that.
Yeah, baby.
Hey. Everybody's got
your
talent.
mom, John. I'm sorry. I don't mean that.
Everybody's got their talent. So Baltimore, New Orleans, that's a Monday night game. Again, you mentioned the line is 2.5. I was a little concerned about this one only because, New Orleans plays Baltimore really tough when they play, which isn't often, but inside that dome. With the Ravens adding even more defensive prowess to that football team. And outside of last week's game on Thursday Night Football, I believe, where they didn't hold a 10-point lead, held at least a 10-point lead in every single game they had played, even the ones that they had lost. So that feels like a good play. And again, I think that we'll continue this conversation a little later on our Twitter feeds at Johnny Utah and at the Sports Carney, because I want to throw together some ideas, JD, for a couple of parlay cards and perhaps a couple of teaser cards. So we'll be checking in on our Twitter feeds again, Johnny Utah and at the Sports Carney. JD, thanks for everything, brother. It's been great talking to you. I can see you're getting into the holiday spirit, so that's fun.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, no doubt. We're letting the tree of lights shine today.
Thanks, John.
See you,
All
brother.
right, guys. We'll see you.
The official mortgage team of the Sports Carnival is the Midwest mortgage team of Land Home Financial. My good buddies, Mike Garcia and Todd Vercruzzi. Listen, we all know the mortgage industry is in a bit of an upheaval right now, and that's why it's more important than ever to go to a couple of guys that you can trust, a local operation right here in La Crosse. That is the Midwest mortgage team. Again, Michael Garcia and Todd Vercruzzi of Land Home Financial. Don't make a mistake with your mortgage needs. Go to the official mortgage provider of the Sports Carnival, the Midwest mortgage team, Mike Garcia and Todd Vercruzzi.
Hey, it's time for koozies, hot tub, and jacuzzis in downtown La Crosse. Whether you're looking to relax after a hard day's work, or maybe you're up for a little soak and poke, we got you covered. That's right, when you're in the market for a hot tub or jacuzzi, all you have to do is call the Coos. 555-SOAK. That's 555-7625.
Soak and poke is a slang term for hot tub sex.
Please practice responsibly.
Now back to the action live from the Trauma Center studios. This is the Sports Carnival. This from former Oilers head coach Bum Phillips. He was once asked why he brought his wife on road trips, and he answered, because she's too ugly to kiss goodbye. Now here's your host, Dave Carney.
Wow. Man,
Isn't that great?
That's back when Henny Goodman was still king of the one-liners. Hey, I take my wife everywhere. She always finds her way back, Pop. Hey, where's our little do we have a sound effect for that? There we go. Wait, I didn't hear that. There it is. Thank you, Uncle Dave. P12 Foreman checking in here. See, P12 Foreman, you don't know this. He lived in Vegas when he was deployed. He was an Air Forceman. Actually met and married his wife. I don't know if he met her there, but he married his wife there. And hopefully this was before that. He says, man, I had some very bad nights at the Green Door, LOL. And then he just goes, completely off script here and says, they go through pounds and pounds of flour, Chad, at the Green Door, rolling fatties and looking for that's a little rough there, Foreman. That's a little rough there. Goodness gracious.
Reminds me of Henry T. Milkins.
That's right. We're gonna see that sometime. We're gonna see Henry T. Milkins.
I will have to see if I can put that together. Yeah. Because I couldn't air that on terrestrial radio. That was too risque.
Oh, yeah. See, I kind of went heel. When I lost you and I moved here to Wisconsin because we couldn't find anybody to take us both at the same time, which whatever, that's their fault.
Wow, all that sounded weird just coming out of talk about the Green Door.
And I see Tony, he's like, Tacoos. But anyways, we come here and, I was told a lot, don't play this, right? Like, don't play this spot. And I thought about it for a good hot second. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to play that. Right? Like, I'm going to play that. And then that's when you really know that nobody's listening. When you're able to get away with that shit for 5 years, you're like, well, they're not paying attention. I'm going to keep running this thing. It's great.
If I can go in the time machine back to yesterday, I wanted to mention this because I thought this was hilarious. I don't know if anybody else picked up on it. So we had Hunter Bumgart from 97.3 The Game, if I'm correct, in Milwaukee, terrestrial radio guy. First thing Dave says to him, how the fuck are you? And the look on his face as his dial-up was dialing up to get him on, by the way, his internet was horrible.
Was a dial-up right there.
I just could see the look on his face like, oh, God, his eyes got big. Like, I don't think you're supposed to say that. Like, dude, it's the internet. You can say whatever the fuck you want.
That's right, baby. And that's, listen, that's
kudos to you, by the way.
It's a little left turn. We want to throw some of our guests as they come on the program. Speaking of guests, tomorrow. So we're working on a couple of things. One of the things that we're working on is this, and I almost hesitate to say it because we've tried this 2 times before and it never worked. So we're not going to put a hard time on this, but we may get a chance to talk to former Central star and now musical wonderkind Bailey Cale, who is, Chad, right now hanging out with Lacrosse Central star and Washington Wizards rookie Johnny Davis in Washington. So there is a possibility. They're staying together right now. They're staying together. We're trying to work through Johnny's PR folks with the Wizards through our attaché, Bailey Cale, to see if we can get this to happen. But that is something that's on the table potentially for tomorrow. We're also going to hope to reach out to Bob Ibeck and get Bob's thoughts here, Chad, on the World Series. And also, I want to talk to Bob about the Packers. Now, if we've still got some time, and yes, Morningwood, the Wisconsin volleyball team is versus Illinois. Don't be so excited about this Wisconsin volleyball team. Now it's taken on a different turn. It feels slightly different in its totality. This Wisconsin volleyball team is talented for many reasons, but we'll watch them. If we have time, though, I want to pull up this Packers slide because I want to get Bob's thoughts on exactly what's happening with Green Bay. So Bob did cover the Washington, at the time, Redskins, who now were going to be potentially up for sale, which we didn't get to this morning. Dan Snyder is exploring with Bank of America something. Again, don't read too much into that. Dan Snyder could be looking to buy out his minority investors. That is something that Dan Snyder could be looking to do.
That's true.
How he can buy out his minority investors. So don't just think this guy's going away because we all have decided to cancel him, which, Chad, you and I decided to cancel this cat fucking 7 years ago. But that's not the point. He might not go away. So I do want to talk to Bob about the NFL because he's got a lot of experience. And here's something that Aaron Rodgers, who was talking to reporters, said yesterday that I want to talk to Bob about, and I want to get your take on this too. So after the trade deadline, which the Packers did nothing, and by the way, let me do just a look at our poll here real quick. What was more disappointing, the team record or the Packers making no trade? Chad, 78-21 in favor of the team's record. So the no trade thing didn't seem to bother Packer fans nearly as much as the team's record. So this is what Rodgers had to say, quote, I think there's still a lot of confidence in the guys in the locker room. I do feel like we need to get healthy. Let me just stop you there. When has Aaron Rodgers expressed any confidence at the guys in the locker room this season? At what point have you heard Aaron Rodgers express confidence in the players in this locker room?
He hasn't. This is because he didn't get what he wants. Now he's got to deal with what he has. That's what that comment is.
Okay.
I can't get what I want. So I guess I just gotta lap these guys up a little bit because this is what I got going forward.
And this is where the bigger asshole comes out, okay? Because you can say you've got confidence in the guys that you've got, even though you have taken to many public forums to criticize the players that you have. Tell them that essentially we should look to get you another job because you're not doing well enough at the job you're doing. This is where the real asshole in Rodgers shows up, as opposed to what we talked about earlier with Giannis, right? The whole team building, we're talking to each other. This is why Rodgers feels confident. The confidence for me comes from within. I feel like that anytime I can go on a run and have gone on runs of playing at near perfection level, I know when I'm playing well, I can raise the level of my teammates in the locker room. I'm going to expect to reach that level. Obviously, we've got to do some things up front, blah, 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 blah. This dude is a complete heel right now because you're talking out of both sides in your mouth. In one side of your mouth, you're saying, well, we got confidence in the guys here, even though I've taken to every public forum to call them to the carpet. And at the other side of your mouth, you're saying, but I'm so great. I'm so magnificent. And I've just done things so well for so many years that I'm going to be able to raise this up. Really? You might have wanted to start that like week 1, because that would have put this team in a whole lot better situation than they are right now. If that's true, and Aaron could just, boom, turn it on and play it. You think you wanted to start that earlier, or is now the time to start playing? This is bullshit. And this is why a lot of Packer fans are starting to call bullshit on Aaron Rodgers, because this is not leadership. This is the antithesis of leadership.
Yeah, and then the other thing is he keeps saying, oh, we're in the right place. This is exactly where we need to be and things of that nature. 3-5 is not where you want to be. And as you just mentioned, if you can turn it on anytime and be perfect, why didn't you start that about 4 games ago? Why were you perfect 4 games ago? Why have all of a sudden now you got, I like to dig myself a nice hole at the beginning of the season before I decide to play. Yeah, I think this is just, he's a bit egocentric. He's a bit of a narcissist, obviously, which isn't a surprise when you're talking about quarterbacks. You're talking about stars. That's generally the case. But I think it's a little too late as far as I'm concerned.
Well, it seems to me to be quite vapid and hollow when we hear Rodgers go out of his way to publicly chastise essentially what becomes the entire organization. So the coaches obviously can't coach because they're putting players on the field that can't play, right? Like, don't discount that as part of Aaron's comments. When he makes a public comment like, well, these guys can't, we shouldn't be giving them reps. Well, you're telling your coaches they don't know what they're doing because they obviously didn't see what you saw and decided to play these guys anyways. You're calling your entire front office to the carpet because they, of course, have done nothing right by you. They haven't picked the right players or whatever. I just think that Aaron Rodgers, at this point in his career, because of his incredible talents, thinks that he can bail on the leadership aspect, which as you get older, and even look, and I know this is a different sport, but look at Kevin Garnett. At the end of Kevin Garnett's career, he was a shadow of himself. He liked to still do the high fives and all the big energy, but he couldn't play. But Chad, what he still was a leader. And the Minnesota Timberwolves brought him back as a limping 40-year-old nearly to play a couple of minutes a game. For what reason? To be a leader. This is where I just don't see Aaron Rodgers having any significant leadership abilities at this point. And if you're a Packers fan right now, this becomes bothersome because it's not just about where you're at 3-5. It's about the fans and the people that support your team and what they're supposed to take away from this going forward. Because Packer fans, listen, yesterday I was wearing my Packer shirt out there loud and proud because the team didn't make a trade doesn't mean we're still not fans. But this guy doesn't do us a lot of favors right now, at least in my estimation, to make us feel like there's going to be a lot of better days ahead because shit, if you can play perfect all the time, Aaron, do it 7 weeks ago. That's nonsense. I mean, that's almost the worst quote I have ever heard him say.
Yeah, and I wonder what that makes his teammates feel. Like, how do they feel in the locker room? So you're shitting on us 1 week. Now we're pretty cool, but then you say you can be perfect, and it's just a matter of me being perfect. And, and again, I think we nailed it at the very beginning. I think that a lot of that stuff that he was talking on Pat McAfee was trying to goat the front office to make a move. They didn't make a move. Now he's got to deal with it, and so he's got to backtrack. He's and it's good timing because of where we're at in this country as far as politics. But this is politics. He's playing politics.
He sure is.
We're in political season, and he is playing politics, and it's very irritating and frustrating. And I imagine for Packer fans out there, luckily I'm not one. I'm a 49er fan. I imagine it's frustrating to see this and to hear this.
Well, your imagining is correct. It is frustrating. So if you've got a take on all of this Packers stuff, we'd love you to go climb our poll like Morning Wood did this morning at the Sports Carney on Twitter. Also, if you're a Facebook group member of the Sports Carnival, we've got that poll up there as well. The question is simply, what is a bigger disappointment? Is it the Packers making no trades or the team's record sitting at 3-5? Again, the team's record at 3-5, Chad, is taking 78, almost 79% of the votes right now.
Or is it Aaron Rodgers' comments? That could have been the third option.
You know what? As a matter of fact, on our Facebook page, you can add in poll questions. You can add in different ways that you can vote. We had a couple of our listeners add in some other options the other day, like Go Bears and Skull Vikings, which took some percentages away. Thanks again to our friends at the Recovery Room, Preferred Insurance, the Midwest Mortgage Team, Kyle Cable, One Trust Real Estate, Joe and Helping Hands Landscaping, and new to the program, Sean O'Neill and the O'Neill Law Firm for all of your support. Guys and gals, we'll see you bright and early tomorrow on a Funky Friday Sports Carnival.